Joining us now is Congressman Khanna, a Democrat from California and a member of the House Oversight Committee. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you for being with us. I want to just sort of follow this conversation in order. Donald Trump saying it's fantastic. All the restaurants are bursting at the seams in Washington, D.C. A couple of things are happening. One is that's not true. Number two, this seems awfully performative. These National Guard and federal officials who are in Washington have seemed to not necessarily be in places that are even determined to be high crime areas in Washington. They just tend to be places where people can see them. And number three, I do worry about the fact that the longer they sit around and people get used to it, that's kind of the point with Donald Trump, right? You're just getting people used to the fact that there are masked federal agents, there are uniformed federal agents, there are tanks in the streets of Washington, D.C. for what we don't know.
Look, it seems that Donald Trump is in the wrong job. It seems like he really wants to be mayor, and maybe he can try his hand in running against Mamdani. I mean, now I hear that he's talking to Cuomo about winning that race, but he's not acting as president. I mean, no one elected him to have public safety in Washington. That's the job of the mayor and the city council, and a lot of this is performative. A lot of it is having a chilling effect on street traffic, and it's not any of his expertise. It's not something where he's supposed to intervene. I rather he focus on standing up for Ukraine and moral clarity and representing this country well on the world stage.
What's your sense of what's happened there? That's been an awful confusing thing that's been going on since Friday with that weird meeting with Vladimir Putin. And then, to his credit, Volodymyr Zelensky brought all his friends and supporters to the White House. What's your sense of where that whole matter is going?
I mean, isn't that embarrassing that the leaders of NATO, the leaders of Western Europe could not trust the American president, our president, to have a meeting with Zelensky? They canceled their holiday plans. They flew in and they had to flatter him so that he would not sell out Ukraine and allow Putin basically to keep all of that territory. I'm glad that they seem to have been able to prevail, at least so that Trump now is saying that there's going to be some security guarantee. Otherwise, who knows what would have happened. But we need to clearly in the Congress make it clear that we're not going to abandon Ukraine, that we are going to support Ukraine, and that Putin needs to give the territory back, and we have to stand for Ukraine's security.
No, you're one of those people in Congress who, without giving up your ideological perspectives, have managed to partner with Republicans, in many cases Republicans who do not share most of your views, but in the interest of democracy and things that are going right. Congress has, generally speaking, been entirely supportive of Ukraine. Donald Trump's Ukraine positions are not in keeping with the Republican Party or in Congress as a whole. Where do you think that lands him right now?
I think people are very concerned. I mean, this is an issue where you don't just have Republicans speaking privately. You have them speaking out publicly. They are concerned that he is going to appease Putin. And they are willing to speak out publicly on this, just like they also are now on the Epstein files. I mean, it's not just Thomas Massie who's shown a lot of courage. You even have Comer, who's the chair of the Oversight Committee, saying that he expects the Justice Department to produce documents. So far, it's been drip, drip, drip. And the things we're getting are basically public information, like what Pam Bondi released. But when we get back, you're going to have all 212 Democrats vote for the release of these Epstein files, and you're going to get a fair amount of Republicans vote for that. And so you're seeing now cracks in the MAGA base when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to Epstein, when it comes to Trump's carte blanche support for Netanyahu. People are feeling betrayed. And when it comes to some of the tariffs on coffee and food and vegetables, which have driven up prices.
You know, I'd be most pleased if something is resolved in Ukraine. But it did occur to me that on Friday and on Saturday and on Sunday and today, because of that, Epstein hasn't been on the front burner. You have talked about Comer and Massie and others. You and I have discussed the fact that there's some betting on Mike Johnson's part that by the time, whenever Congress gets called back, and apparently that it may be longer, the recess may be longer than originally planned, that this will have faded from the limelight. As you said, they're going to start, the drip, drip, drip continues. They're going to start giving information that may be already public information, certainly not what you and others are asking for. Tell me how you see that playing out.
I think the speaker is just wrong. I mean, at the town halls I go on I want to talk about the tax breaks to the billionaires, the awful Medicaid cuts, the economic policies we need. And often the first few questions I get are about the Epstein files. And it's because people are enraged that the speaker shut down Congress to prevent a vote on the release of these files. They're enraged that the victims have not had justice or a say. Thomas Massie and I are going to have a press conference on September 3rd with many of the victims speaking out for the first time. I believe this story is not going away until we have full release of the Epstein files and transparency. And it's actually going to dominate the coverage, in my view, in the first few weeks of September.
Some of the stuff that's going on at the DOJ and the FBI, it's comical. We were showing you Ed Martin dressed like Columbo outside of Tisha James' house. But you've got Ed Martin doing that and investigating this mortgage issue with Tish James and with Adam Schiff. You've got the Missouri Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, who's coming in as the FBI co-deputy director alongside Dan Bongino, because nobody really knows what's going on with Dan Bongino now. He had been calling for the Epstein files, and then suddenly he came out and said, there's no there. There's this whole D.C. crime weird stuff that's going on. There is a worrisome part. As comical and dysfunctional as it is, there is a worrisome part of this whole thing, right? The federalization of police and the idea that Donald Trump will just keep on scraping and scraping until he finds people who will actually do his bidding. It's
very worrisome. And Ali, as a son of immigrants, I remember my parents saying, you know, in America, the amazing thing is politics is relatively clean. Yes, you got to raise money, but people don't go prosecute each other. And when I was getting into politics, my grandmother said, oh, no, this could be violent. They go after each other. And I remember my mom saying, no, that's not how they do things in America. And now we're really becoming a nation where you're politicizing law enforcement, where a party in power is using the tools of law enforcement to go after their political opponents. That is contrary to the very thing that makes us unique as a nation, the rule of law. And it should concern people of all parties and backgrounds.
Do you hear, because you're out there, you're out there at town halls, you're talking to people. Is this registering with people that some of the worst things we've seen in the world's history get started this way?
You know, it comes up. Unfortunately, these arguments about the rule of law, about democracy, are more abstract. I wish they resonated more. Vice President Harris should have been president if people had taken it more seriously. But I'll tell you what is resonating more broadly. There's a sense that Trump is betraying some of his promises, that, you know, he's not living up to actually focusing on prices and the working class, and that is resonating.
Congressman, good to see you as always. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. Congressman Ro Khanna of California.